Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my first impressions of the Wells Audio V8 headphone amp. And as you can see, this is a beautiful amp. I love the way this thing looks, and it's pretty big and pretty heavy, so I'm not going to hold it for a long time. So let me talk about it a little while, and then I'll give you a closer view of it. Anyway, this was loaned to me by Wells Audio, and it currently sells for $1,500 US. And this is sort of, it's not even really on the website yet. I think if you go on the Wells Audio website, you won't find this headphone amp. There's only been a few of them made so far, and based on the serial number on this one, I'm assuming that this is the 8th one that was made. So I'm really lucky, really fortunate to get a chance to review this so early. But I talked to Jeff Wells from Wells Audio, really super nice guy, and he gave me the chance to take a listen and review this. So anyway, these are hand built in the USA, and it is an OTL type of tube amp. And for those that are newer into headphones or newer into tube amps, OTL stands for output transformerless, and there's basically three types of tube amps. You have your hybrid, which have tubes in the input stage and then a solid state output stage. Then you have your transformer coupled, which the output runs through transformers and lowers the impedance. And then you have OTL, which this is, which like I said, output transformerless, but a lot of people, including myself, really think that OTL give you the cleanest, most tube-like sound. So they are pretty popular for headphone amps now. So anyway, this amp uses two power tubes, which are 6A S7s, and those would be the larger tubes in the back. And then he uses two driver tubes, which are 12 AU7s. But they can be switched out, and there's a switch on top of the amp where you can switch between the two different tubes. You can also use 12 AY7 driver tubes. This amp has one set of RCA single-ended inputs that are on the rear. It has two headphone jacks. One is a 6.3 millimeter single-ended, and the other is a 4-pin XLR. But it's not balanced. It's just for convenience, so you can use your 4-pin XLR cable. And I'll go deeper into it. My full review of this is just my first impressions, but I'll try to explain why there's really no reason or real advantage to going to balanced or fully balanced on an OTL type tube amp. In fact, it can actually degrade the sound. So this is single-ended, and it's the same with, I think, every OTL type tube amp I've reviewed so far has been single-ended. And the dimensions of this are 9 inches wide. It's 13 inches deep front to back, and that includes the knob on the front. And it's about 8.5 inches tall up to the top of the tubes. And as far as the weight, and none of these specs, well, like I said, this tube amp isn't even on the website yet, so the dimensions I had to measure myself, and the weight, I couldn't use my kitchen scale. That only goes up to 11 pounds, and this is a little bit too heavy, so what I had to do is use my bathroom scale, which isn't going to be totally accurate, but it appears to weigh in at approximately 13.6 pounds. It's not super heavy, but it is heavy enough that it feels to be built very substantial. And if you look at the build quality, it's outstanding. Not only is it a beautiful amp, but I mean the build quality of the enclosure, the chassis, all that is pretty much flawless. So let me pick this up again and roll in a little closer and give you a better look at this, you can see on the front here, you have your headphone jacks, your 6.3 millimeter and your 4-pin XLR, and then you have a large volume knob. And I want to mention, let me try to get a hold of this in a way I won't drop it. So this volume knob, it has little indentations. You can feel little clicks as it turns. But you can listen to it with it in between. The volume on this is non-linear. It starts out real slow. It very gradually increases in volume, and even a sensitive headphone, you're going to be down around 9 o'clock or so. And then as you go up towards the upper end of this, it starts ramping up real fast. The power increases a lot and the volume increases a lot. And I did want to point out something a little unusual. Most volume knobs start at about 7 o'clock and go to about 5 o'clock on the position, but this one here for some reason starts at 6 o'clock and only goes to about 4 o'clock. You can see it spins around to there. Took a little while to get used to that. It's just different, but it doesn't really seem to make a difference. Try to show you the back of this, and like I said, it's a little bit heavy and definitely don't want to drop this. I do not have $1,500 to replace it. So on the back, you've got your single-ended inputs, and you can see they're very high quality RCA jacks, not the little, stamped metal ones that pull off when you have a tight-fitting cable. You've got your AC input here. And if you can see, that serial number is 008, so I'm assuming this is the 8th one made. And then on the top, first thing you can see is a big V8 on it, because that's the name of this, the V8. And then you've got your driver tubes and your power tubes. And then you got the switch here, and you can switch between using 12 AU7s or 12 AY7s by flipping that switch. So I'm going to set this down. There's not really anything on the bottom of it. You got some rubber feet. And I think there will be 2 upgrade versions of this, a level 2 and a level 3 at some time in the future, but this is the standard level 1 version. So anyway, before I get into the sound of this, I wanted to mention that to do my reviews, I use sort of a combination of different types of rock, a lot of classic rock, excuse me, some pop, some electronics, a lot of acoustic. More than anything, doing reviews of headphone equipment, I use acoustic music with real instruments, real guitars, pianos, things like that that have a specific sound, and they really tell you whether a headphone or an amp is reproducing the sound accurately, because you know how a guitar should sound, or you know how a piano should sound. With like electronic music and all that, you really don't know how it originally sounded. So anyway, a little bit of orchestral music, and then the equipment I used in reviewing this. I've been using CDs, and the CD player or transport, it's actually a player, but I've been using it as a transport, is the SMSL PL200 CD player that I'm currently reviewing. And like I said, I'm using that as a transport only, and I've used 2 different DACs so far with this, but I've got more DACs that I will use before I do my final review or my full review on this. But so far, I've used the Topping D70S MQA version, which is out of production, but is still my favorite under $1,000 DAC. I prefer it to the newer D70 Pro, even the D70 Pro Saber, and I actually prefer it to the D90, what was it, the SE. It just has a very warm kind of R2R type sound to it, like an R2R DAC, and I just prefer it to even the more expensive topping DACs. But it does still measure very well. And then I also use the Hi-Fi Man Himalaya Pro that is part of the EF600 amp DAC combination. I use that as a standalone DAC and ran it into this. And then as far as headphones I've used in my working up into my first impressions here, I used the hard to drive Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE, the Hi-Fi Man Ananda Nano, the Hi-Fi Man Aria Organic, the Hi-Fi Man HE1000 SE, and believe it or not, even the Hi-Fi Man Susvara. And most of you are going to question that. Wait a minute, didn't he say this is an OTL tube amp? Well, OTL tube amps are known to not be able to do a good job of driving planar magnetic headphones, especially the hard to drive planar magnetics. And that's what's really unique about this amp, because like I said, most OTL tube amps cannot even do a good job with the easy to drive planar magnetics, and this thing not only does very well, I mean it does the obvious, this thing is outstanding with high impedance dynamic driver headphones, like and I didn't get to that yet, but the ZMF Atrium was one of the headphones I used with this. That's 300 ohms. And then the JM Audio XTC2 with the beryllium driver and 64 ohms. But this does an outstanding job with both of those. They're dynamic drivers, higher impedance, but this, unlike any other OTL amp I've used before, except for one prototype from Waveborn. Waveborn did send me a prototype OTL amp a couple of years ago that did put out enough power to drive hard to drive planar magnetic headphones, but it did have one issue. It got way too hot. After about an hour and a half, I had to shut it down. It was so hot I couldn't even touch it. So I don't know if that's ever been designed further or if that's kind of on hold, but anyway, but this amp not only does an outstanding job with some of the easier to drive planar magnetics like the Aria Organic, the HE1000 SE, but this will actually do a very good job of driving the Susvara, which is one of the hardest to drive headphones there that you can find. So very unusual for a OTL Type 2 amp. Anyway, so getting into the sound, and like I said, I did use the ZMF Atrium and the JM Audio XTC2. So getting into the sound, I would describe it as slightly on the warm side of neutral, but what really jumps out about this and what really caught my attention is just the exceptional clarity and detail. Just such a clean, beautiful sound, and I really notice it in vocals. The voices just sound so clean out of this, and to be honest, I've only heard that clarity out of a couple of other amps up to this point, and I've reviewed probably at least 2 or 3 dozen amps. And so words I would use to describe the sound of this would be smooth, liquid, rich, almost on the verge of being lush, but yet with no loss of detail. This thing is super detailed, but it just sounds beautiful. I almost don't have words to describe it. Yet it's smooth, but yet it's very dynamic, very punchy. The bass hits hard. Drums hit hard, everything. It's not a soft sound. It's got some weight to it. It's got some substance to it. The sound stage is very wide and has very good depth to it, and this amp has a very three-dimensional sound to it. And I especially noticed that with the ZMF Atrium. It just, that headphone, if you've heard a ZMF Atrium, you know what a great headphone it is. But if you've only heard it on a solid state amp, you have no idea how good that headphone can sound. You hook the ZMF Atrium up to a good OTL amp, like say the Felix Audio Elise, which I've reviewed with that, or this, and that headphone it steps it up to another level. It puts it up on a level where it competes with any headphone that I've heard, up to and including the Susvara. So anyway, the ZMF Atrium with this amp just becomes so three-dimensional and just so much depth to it, just so much layering, and you're just surrounded by the sound. You just feel like you're part of the music. So, but like I was saying earlier, the really unusual thing about this amp is this puts out enough power, and usually with OTL amps, the problem isn't the voltage. They usually have plenty of voltage, and that's why they're so good with high impedance headphones. But the problem is they can't put out enough current to supply hard to drive planar magnetic headphones with the current they need to sound right. And what happens with a planar magnetic, with most OTL amps, they're not putting out enough current, and what happens is the mid-range and the treble can sound beautiful, but the bass can sound kind of flat and a little lacking. The bass loses weight, it loses tightness, and it loses dynamics, is usually the case with an OTL amp hooked up to a hard-to-drive planar magnetic, especially like the Susvara. But this amp doesn't have that problem. Somehow it's putting out enough current that the bass is solid and tight and punchy even on the Susvara. And like I said, I haven't read any specs as far as how much power this actually puts out, but just my estimate based on other amps I've listened to, I would say this amp is putting out a solid, undistorted 3 to 5 watts per channel to be able to drive this Susvara as well as it does. And I will admit that, and it depends on the recording level of the CD I'm listening to, but most of them, when I am listening to the Susvara, I am up in the like 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, well really 2 to 3 o'clock on the volume knob. I'm up in like the last 4 to 5 steps, but those 4, once you get up to the top, like I said, the volume knob is non-linear and it starts out real slow. The volume increase is real gradual, but when you get up to the top, each click is a pretty big jump. But like I said, you can listen to it in between the clicks if you don't want to go up to that next level of volume that far. You can go in between. So listening to the Susvara, depending on the average CD, average recording level, I'm probably in the last 4 clicks on the volume knob, but it stays perfectly clean even if you go up to the last click. There's no distortion or anything. And going up to that last click, it will be very loud. So you can listen to even the Susvara at a loud volume with this, as long as your DAC is putting out, you know, a normal output of, I think single-ended is usually 2.2 volts, your output from your DAC to your amp. So, but I've tried it with a couple different DACs, and it was pretty much the same with both of them. So I'm assuming the average DAC will have plenty of output for this. So anyway, I just did want to say, and I think I mentioned it earlier, that this just sounds outstanding with the ZMF Atrium. Like I said, this and the Felix Audio Elise will take that headphone to another level. And I did want to mention, when I get into my comparisons, well, before I do my full review, I will do more comparisons to some amps. I haven't really compared it to any other amps yet, more so than just by memory. I will do some direct side-by-side comparisons And some of the amps I have, I can't compare it to the amps that I have here. I've got both the Felix Audio Echo, which is a little lower price than this, and the Felix Audio Elise, which is a little higher. The Felix Audio Elise is actually, it's a similar looking amp to this, and with the ZMF Atrium, it seems to sound pretty similar, so I'm really curious how the two will compare with the ZMF Atrium. But I can tell you right now, the Felix Audio Elise cannot handle hard-to-drive headphones like the Hi-Fi Man Sesvara, which this can. So, you know, but it depends what kind of headphones you're going to use. But like I said, I have those to compare to this before I do my full review. And I love both of those amps. Felix Audio makes some outstanding amps, but this is a little different, you know. It's a variety, and, you know, the made in the USA is a big thing too, you know. It's not a bad idea to support your own country, support your own economy. So anyway, I did want to mention one thing about this, and it's not really a bad thing, but it does get very warm. It's on the verge of hot. Not so hot that you can't touch it, but at like an hour, hour and a half into listening to this, the sides of it especially, you know, both of the sides, it gets to the point where you can put your hands on it, but it's almost to the point of being uncomfortable. I mean, it does get pretty hot, and so you're going to need to leave a little space around it, a little breathing space, a little space above it. You know, it does put off some heat, but it's not to the point where you can't touch it, or you know, it's dangerous or anything like that. It just puts off some heat, which is pretty typical of tube amps. Couple of other amps I have that I can compare to this. I have two amps by Waveborn. One is the Preamp Plus, which is an OTL tube amp also, and I think that sells for, excuse me again, a similar price. Excuse me while I get a drink. Worked outside in the heat this afternoon. It was about 90 degrees, a little bit dehydrated, so sorry for the little drink break there. But if you've watched my videos, you know that's pretty much every video I have to do that. So anyway, and then I also have the Waveborn Power Amp Plus, which is a transformer coupled tube amp that actually does put out enough power to power the Hi-Fi Man Sesvara. It also does a very good job, and from memory it has a similar sound to this, so I'm looking forward to comparing those two. So and then I've got a few more DACs I want to try with this, and the one I really want to try is my Audio GD R8 MK2, which is a very good R2R DAC, and it has a very three-dimensional sound, so I'm looking forward to trying that with this amp, especially with the ZMF Atrium. It should be an incredibly three-dimensional layered sound from that combination. But I've also got the iFi Neo IDSD2, which has a very good DAC in it, very super clean, and the Topping D70 Pro Saber version, which is one of the best measuring DACs on the planet. I think it's about a $700 or $800 DAC, but I think it actually measures better than the D90 did. I saw a list of measurements of like 300 DACs, and it was like in the top 2 or 3. So outstanding measuring DAC. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap up this first impressions. It's getting kind of long, and I will get back to you. Probably be a month, more realistically 2 months, before I get back with my full review of this. I've got a lot of equipment in for review, and this is a busy time of the year for me with my lawn care business, and I've got to make the money while I can. the $80 or so a month I make from YouTube just doesn't pay the bills. So unfortunately, not a full-time reviewer yet. Don't know if I ever will be. I still have to work for a living. So I, put as much time as I can into doing these reviews, and hopefully I'll be able to do, I do a lot of comparisons, and that takes a lot of time, comparing equipment, especially things that sound similar. You can spend hours going back and forth trying to find subtle little differences, and that's what I try to do, let you know how this compares to something else you may have heard. So anyway, try to get back in a month or so with my full review of this, but just want to say I'm loving this amp so far. Just outstanding sound, and it's worked with every headphone I've thrown at it. So anyway, if this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel already, please do. And the Headphone Experience on Facebook is now up to 32.2 thousand members and just keeps growing. So I'm inviting you all to join us over there if you haven't already. And once again, thanks for watching my video.